back by unpopular demand, me. Today's video is going to be my first reading wrap-up, if it actually gets edited and uploaded, which it seems to be an issue for me. So I read 11 books this month, and that might sound impressive, but I'm gonna tell you right now, my dears, that it is mostly smut. But the first book that I read this month actually was not smut, and I was very excited about it, is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. Now, talking about The Goldfinch is going to be difficult for me because there's going to be a lot of times when I'm going to want to spoil something. I won't. Everyone, calm down. I won't. But it's such a... The cat's crying for no apparent reason. It's such a good book, and I was just watching a wrap-up from one of my favorite booktubers. I think her name... One of my favorites, and I forget. Oh my god. Her name is Isabella. I'll put it here because I cannot remember for the life of me. Used something for another book that I read, Gone Girl. She said that it was like character development in reverse, and I think that is so interesting and so true for this book as well, because you start off with this deep love and almost motherly care for this child that you're introduced to, Theo, and as the story goes on, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but his innocence starts to wean away. And not that that makes him bad, it just makes him make decisions that might not be smart. There was a lot of me just going, girl, stop. It was a lot of me talking to the characters and being a crazy person, being like, can you just stop doing what you're doing? Because it's a lot and it's too much. Also, very concerning awakening in me. I had a bit of a crush on like the Russian best friend. I don't want to talk about it. Not really. I don't want to talk about it. What's done is done. Anyway, I gave the book 5 stars. I am not doing a good job of telling you why. Book 5 stars. Yes, it is a long read, and some people say that it kind of lags. For me, it didn't really lag. Now, I also had the audiobook for it, so that might have helped. The audiobook was great, but it didn't lag for me because I felt that every scene that was put in the book had a purpose, and it was purposeful in the way of really letting you see the characters, because this is what this book is about. It is about the characters. If you're looking for like a big plot line and like crazy shit happening, which like crazy stuff does happen, but there's a build up to all of it. So if you're expecting that, maybe don't go into this book, because it is very much character driven. It is very much my style, because if I don't feel something for the characters, all the fantasy, all the action, all of that really doesn't mean a lot to me. So this book was 5 stars for me because the author really took the time to develop the characters, even if it was kind of a reversal of what we see as character development, in making us feel conflicted with Theo in the decisions that he's making. Anyway, the next book is much more cheerful. It is the Heartstopper yearbook. I absolutely love the Heartstopper universe, so I was so excited when the yearbook was announced, and I saw it in the bookstore for the first time, and I was just like, girl, no, I can't afford you, but I want you bad. It's definitely not a book that I would pay full price for, and that's nothing against the book. It's just that I'm not really a collector. I really love the Heartstopper books, but I don't own any of them, because once I finish a book, I usually don't keep it. Or I just get it from the library, because especially with graphic novels and manga and stuff like that that I read, I'm either not going to reread it, or I just read it in like half an hour to an hour, and it seems like kind of a waste when I'm not spending so much time with these characters. And fuck, mangas have like 30 volumes. I started reading I started reading Attack on Titan without knowing it had like 40 volumes. Does this author think that I have time? But back on track. The yearbook is so sweet. You already know a lot about the characters, but it is just a cute thing to add to your collection if you do like collecting the Heartstopper memorabilia and stuff like, oh my god, imagine if there was like little figures and stuff. Okay, I'm not a collector, but girl, I would so fast purchase that with my student loan money. It is not for groceries and rent. It is if Heartstopper comes out with figures. Yeah, I rated this, I think it was 4 stars. It's hard to rate it because it was just fun. There was little substance to it, obviously. It was just for fun. But I really enjoyed seeing the first sketches of Charlie and the first sketches of... Oh my god, a bitch just almost ate shit outside. I have my windows, like my blinds open, so that people can judge me for talking to myself, and this girl just like hard tripped on the sidewalk. Me too. If if you enjoy Heartstopper, you will enjoy this, so give it a shot. The next book that I read, whew, it's called Iron Widow. I did have a physical copy of it, but I think I gave it to my friend. Yeah, I gave it to my friend, and you'll see that very evident in these videos is when I'm finished reading a book, I either give it to the library, the thrift store, or to a friend. So I usually don't have the physical copies, even if I did read it physically, so that's why I'm putting pictures up here. No one fucking cares. But this book, listen, we have polyamory, which I have never read in a book before, and I thoroughly enjoyed, made me question things. It also had a lot more sci-fi than I was expecting, and I hear that from a lot of people online, is that they weren't expecting all of the badass characters having like machine, animal, transformer shit. And Optimum Prime. It's so cool, and the magic system is so interesting. Like, it really plays on like the yin and yang, like needing a balance, and just like there's this one plot twist that I can't tell you about, obviously, but like it's so mind-blowing, and it's not fair that I read it at the bus stop because I was feeling very excited, I'll say, and there's a lot of emotions crossing my face that probably worried the other people on the bus. But I really loved it. I think that some of the things that people have to say about its view on women is really interesting, because the main character is obviously a feminist and a great example, I think, of someone who has just been battered because of them being a woman. And but there are some people who say that, you know, the way that she speaks to other women who are more feminine can be a little disrespectful or a little jarring, because they're seeing feminism as only masculine women, or only women who like fighting and stuff like that. Whereas every woman is important in the feminist movement, and so I do think that that's something that I would look more into, but I also think that there are certain people in the book that are examples of someone who is feminine or soft, who is also very hard and very tough, and just shows that in different ways. Like the women that take care of her when she's first starting out on her journey, the women that, or woman, there's not many, who help her through her struggles, would for me be a great example of a motherly feminine figure who's also represented as someone incredibly strong. So I would I don't know, I would argue against that claim, but I do think it's important to mention, because that's a very interesting thing, especially with feminist literature, of how do we see the women in the story, other than the main protagonist and the strong, masculine, like those kind of women who are wonderful and have really brought up this movement just as much as anyone else, but also seeing the softer and the just women. Next book that I want to talk about, I actually have a copy of still, because I have not recommended it to anyone. I have talked about it, and that is something that I think is important to note about. You cannot see it, bitch. It is a beautiful cover though. It's really pretty. That is something I will note about the book. I read this by myself, and I read it quite quickly. I think that this book belongs in a book club. I think it is here for discussion. And I do not know anyone who has read this book, and so I have not discussed it with anyone who has read this book, and I think that that's a very important part of this one, because it brings up a lot of pain and hurt and complicated feelings, and my favorite part about complicated books and complicated feelings is talking about it with another person. So if anyone has read An American Marriage, I haven't even said what it was. It's An American Marriage by T.R.E. Jones, and it's really hard. And so, I mean, it's about a young couple who, in their first, like, first year of marriage, the husband gets falsely incarcerated and spends most of the book in prison writing letters to his wife. So it's very hard. It's very hard to know who to root for, and if you should be rooting for anyone. If it talks a lot about discrimination and the racial bias that the court holds against Black people in America and in Canada as well. It is a very difficult read. It is an important read, I think, but I would recommend reading it with another person. Also, the back says, a stunning epic love story. Even Mushroom is like, girl, that is a lie. That is a straight up falsehood. The next book I want to talk about is the sequel to Curse So Dark and Lonely, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I was so excited for this, and I was really disappointed. That's it, kids. Never be excited about anything, ever. But This book was actually, I was so excited for it because it was from the perspective of my favorite character, Gray, in the first book, who doesn't get a POV. And so I was so excited to read from his point of view, and I was just bored. I was bored and I was annoyed, and the other perspective I wasn't crazy about. I thought she was a little annoying. It does not help that I had this on audiobook, and the girl who was narrating, I am so sorry, was, well, she was shrill. I would explain her voice, describe her voice as shrill, and I don't really want to be listening to sirens when I'm trying to read my book, so this is so mean. In the first book, you could argue that not a lot happens, but you don't really notice because you're so invested in the characters and you're so invested in the world. I was reading this, and yeah, barely nothing happens. And that's it. Like, I didn't care. And I felt so sad because I cared so much about Gray in the first book, and I wasn't even seeing from his point of view. I was just seeing him as a side character. But, like, I don't have complicated feelings about this book. It kind of sucked. 2 stars. The next book that I read was another disappointing read. Can we say reading slump pending? I read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. Now, listen. I understand that Ali Hazelwood has the exact same formula for every novel. So far, I have eaten it up. The only problem here is that it was like a novel. It wasn't one of her novellas. It was the same size, I think, of the Love Hypothesis that everyone loved. The only difference is that these characters were completely unlikable. In the Love Hypothesis, there was some miscommunication. Every Ali Hazelwood book has that. I don't know why I keep reading them because I hate that trope of miscommunication. It is so stupid. It is so childish. I don't like it. These characters are so childish. And for someone who works for NASA, she is so dumb. Like, I was sitting there, barbecue sauce on my titties, just looking at her like, how do you build, like, rockets? Like, why are you here? This woman is a neuroscientist working with engineers. She is not intelligent. Like, I am so much smarter than her. Yeah, if you loved the Love Hypothesis, and even if you liked the novellas, like, I have a pretty good opinion of Ali Hazelwood. Please don't read this book. It is just the Love Hypothesis, but annoying. And I went through it trying so hard to suspend judgment. And it turns out I'm judgy as hell, so it's not it didn't work. 1 star? 2 star? I'm actually rethinking my rating of 2 stars. Because I'm realizing how much I disliked it. It made me laugh a few times. I will allow 2 stars. The next book was a complete opposite of the Love Hypothesis, of Love on the Brain. It was hot. It was sexy. It was good. Little concerning that I was into it. We'll ignore that. This is actually I'm realizing this is my 2nd book about polyamorous relationships this month. No one call my boyfriend. Don't tell him what's happening. This book is Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert, and let me tell you, this is how you reuse a script. Someone call as Ali Hazelwood and tell her this is how we do it. Katie Robert has a formula for the Dark Olympus series, and I am into it. She changes enough, especially about the characters. We're not getting the same characters over and over again. Each one has their own personality, and I know that is way too much to ask for in a book, but I just like my characters to be able to be I just like the characters to be noticeably different than the other characters. I don't know if that's too much to ask. Seemingly, yes. Helen, girl boss. Love her. Loved her character. Achilles, love his character. Super cool. The one guy whose name I could never pronounce. Guys, I'm starting to think I have a speech impediment. It's like, as a kid, I know I did a little bit, but at this point, I don't think it went away. But yeah, Wicked Beauty was incredible. I'm realizing I'm not really giving a synopsis on any of these books. I encourage you to just look them up yourself because that's not my job. Wicked Beauty was so good. I think it had the right amount of spice and the right amount of connection between the characters, so when we actually got to the spicy bits, you were like, oh, love that for them. Yeah, Katie Robert just put out Radiant Sin, which is the next book in the Dark Olympus series, and I have it saved at my library, and I'm so excited to read it, but it's not coming in, and I'm mad. I don't understand why I don't have, like, just tons of money that I can just spend on books. God bless libraries. That's what I'll say. I use the library so much. We are getting off track. Oh my god. The next book that I read was just a novella by one of my favorite authors whose name is evading me. I think it's Holly Jackson? There's 2. I always mix them up. Holly Black wrote The Cursed Prince. The the Cruel Prince. Oh my god. Holly Jackson. Yes, that's her name. We're going with that. Oh my god. What if it's not? Holly wrote a book. We're just first name basis. Holly wrote a book. It was incredible. Called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Now, a lot of people don't like this series. A lot of people love this series. I've heard very mixed reviews, but I really enjoy it, especially because I had them on audiobook, and just, she has a lot of podcast elements, especially in the second and third book. She has a lot of interviews, and the audiobooks were fantastic because every character had a voice actor, and it made it feel more like a movie than a book. So I can understand maybe reading it physically would not have the same effect, but the audiobooks were fantastic, so I highly recommend. And that's no different for this novella called Killjoy, which is not serious. Like, it is just a novella for fun, and just our kind of detective girly having a moment with her friends and going to a party and solving like a little mystery. And it's just fun. It's cute. I think that it's cute that it is before the events of the first book and of the trilogy, so it kind of shows her initial interest in crime and criminology and being a fantastic detective even before she got into it seriously, because she's just playing a game. So I think if you enjoy the trilogy, you'll enjoy this one. It's kind of goofy, nothing serious, but I really liked it. Next book that I read is this one, and let me just tell you, it deserved the Nobel Prize in Literature. Now, I gave it a 4 stars just because I wasn't incredibly connected to the characters. I think it deserved the Nobel Prize in Literature because of the amount of times I have thought about it and talked about it after reading it like 2 weeks ago. Every time I picked this up to read, all I was thinking of that John Mulaney clip that was like, I don't like robots thinking a thing. This book is about AI, like, having thoughts and feelings. And if we can truly replace people with machines. And this book was written, I don't know when it was written. It was written a while back, before there was so much discussion about AI on the internet. Of course there was AI back then. It was only probably 6 years when this came out. But it wasn't so heavily discussed on the internet of its uses, or if it is ethical, moral, what we should use it for. And it's just kind of scary reading it now and knowing that this discussion on robotics and how helpful they can be, how fucking scary they can be. I am so scared of robots. But I was discussing this with my friend, and I said, yeah, it kind of freaks me out that, you know, we think that we can unravel the human heart and replace it by a robot. And he's like, yeah, that's the plan, sis. Dominic, you're scaring me. I don't want this. I don't want this. Because we get the perspective of both parents. I'm not going to tell you what happens. But we get the perspective of both parents. One is very much against AI and has a hard time because he thinks maybe he is just not being progressive and he's not just going with the times, but he's like, I don't think we can replace a human heart. And the mother is trying really hard to be for this AI for her own reasons, and she has this holdup on it that, you know, she can't fully accept the AI even though she really wants to. And so we get a brilliant 2 perspectives on how people would react to slowly being introduced to robots, and robots who can replace people and take care of your children and be parents and be companions. It is so cool. I'll say that. I think this book is so cool, and if I were to read this for a class and be able to annotate it and talk to other people about it, I really think it would hit that 5-star mark. On my own, reading it, probably 4.5 stars, but I think that it would elevate it just that much more if I were talking to it with a group of people that are also afraid of robots. Next book, I don't want to talk about, y'all. I don't want to talk about that much. I don't want you to judge me. I don't want you to talk to me. But listen, I heard about Monster. You can see by the cover where I'm going with this. It's monster smut. Let's just get it out in the open. Katie Robert is one of my favorite smut authors because she can make me feel a little something for a dragon. Now, I'm not saying that I want to have intimates with a dragon. I'm just saying, I'm so exhausted all the time. I don't want to. Anyway, if you want something funny and weird, and if you're like me, somewhat arousing, but you don't want to talk about it, Katie Robert is your girl. Now, the next book that I read is an author that's been on my radar for quite a while, is Thomas King's Indians on Vacation. I thought that this book was, it was so odd because this author is incredible at mixing the darkest and most serious parts of depression with humor, and humor that you would find in a person who suffers from these things. I found myself relating a lot to the main character whenever he was talking about his depression and his anxiety and dread and existentialism. It was something that someone could read without a mental illness and understand it, or someone with a mental illness could read it and feel understood. It is really good, I'd say. I only gave it 3.5 stars. I'd like to explain that that's just because sometimes the humor kind of took away from a moment that was really difficult, or something that felt too difficult that maybe the author wanted to soften a bit with the humor. And in those moments it kind of disconnected me from the character, because he was an older man who was dealing with depression that he's felt for a long time, and there's no real will to change, and I think that's a very difficult point of view to look at depression from, because it's real. It's really real, but it is hard to swallow. So I am back and forth with this book, because I think that it's really funny, but I also think it's really, really sad, and the author is probably right in making you question when you should be sad, and when the character is allowing himself to feel the pain of depression and trauma and hurt. You're kind of mixed up. You don't know when you should be feeling for him or not. And maybe that was the point of this book. I think if I were to reread it, again, I know I've said this like 4 times in this video, but if I were to read it with someone else, I think I would enjoy it more. Because although the things in this book are true for depression, it is not true for everyone. And it can be hard when you want to promote change and hope and stuff like that. Whereas this book, it's in the last chapter that you see the first inch of hope in his life. But he's like, I'm assuming like a 60-year-old man, 55, 60, I don't know. He's an older man that has depression. And I want to pay for his therapy. Last book, again, is just weird monster smut. It is just a vampire and a plus-size girly pop getting it on. There is 0 plot. I do think that the female character is very funny. I want to be her friend. But there is still a lot of miscommunication, and when they weren't having sex, they were just fighting, and I didn't really understand the point. Like, I just felt frustrated with them most of the time, because I'm like, you're not, like, you're going over to talk to him, and then immediately, on the desk, fucking. Like, I'm like, just give it 5 minutes. Talk it out. We'll get to the rest, please. And then we'll just, things could have been sorted out in 30 pages. It's in a 120-page book. It could have been sorted out real quickly. The rest of it could have been fucking. I would have been fine with that. I would have been here for that. But all the fighting in between was getting obnoxious. Those are the 11 books that I read in March. I had a pretty good reading month, I think, especially since we had more assignments coming on and I was hauling ass trying to pass 2 classes. If you like these kind of videos, please let me know, because I watch them all the time and I really enjoy them and I think it's fun. Especially if you have read any of the books that I read this month. If you put in the comments what you thought of them, that'll just make my reading experiences so much better. It'll really be the highlight of my day. So please, if you have any thoughts or opinions on these books, if you're going to try reading any of these books because of my reviews of them, anything but Love on the Brain, then please let me know. I'd really be happy if you tried any of them out. And I guess like and subscribe and stuff. Feels weird. I shouldn't say that. Yeah, I hope that you guys read something today, even if it's just a page, even if it's just a chapter. I hope that you find things that bring you joy, because life can be kind of stupid. Okay, bye!